I want to preface my comments by just saying that the reason why we have a food bank is to address a scarcity. That there's just not enough food, and in Florida's case, we're talking about somewhere around 3.5 million people who struggle to afford to pay for food, and half of those are kids. But the beauty of this is that in the United States and in Florida, we have a logistics issue, because what we have is an abundance in agriculture, and it's a matter of resolving the scarcity by redistributing the abundance using vehicles like food banks and Farmers Feeding Florida and opportunities like that. In most of the rest of the world, the scarcity is the only problem. It's not logistics, it's not distribution, there is nothing to redistribute. We know that we have a need out there. We know that kids are going hungry. We know that when kids show up in school hungry and their little stomachs are grumbling, they're not going to focus on the FCAT. They're not going to focus on algebra. They're not going to focus on reading whatever they were supposed to be reading. They're focused on what time is the snack or when is lunch. And if that, like it is in many cases, if that's their only good meal of the day, it becomes increasingly important. Because the same kids who are hungry in school have baby brothers and sisters that aren't yet in school. They're doing without. Their parents are struggling, as has been said, working fewer hours, underemployed, making less than they were making, so everybody's struggling. And along came the Association of Food Banks, Rebecca Brislane and Chip Hinton and others, who said, here's an opportunity to funnel the abundance of what Florida farmers are producing into food banks. And it began for me with sort of a story that came from one of our tomato packers who said, I called our local food bank one day, and it wasn't in this area, it's just north of here. They said, we were looking at this load of culls, and we said, it's just wasteful that half of them are going to the landfill and half of them are going to the cow pasture. So I called my local food bank and I said, hey, I've got 2 loads of high quality tomatoes, but they're just not going to grade out. Would you mind sending someone over to pick them up? You can have them. Gratis. Take them, please. So they sent over 2 little old ladies in a Honda Civic. And he said, what may I help you? And they said, we're here to pick up the first load of tomatoes and we're going to come back and get the second load. He said, you don't understand. It's 2 semi-loads that I'm willing to give you. And so began the discussion of how do you break down the logistical barriers of enough refrigeration space that you saw in there and the racks that are in there, corporate sponsors to pay the utility bill for maintaining something at 38 degrees in August in Florida, and the trucks to distribute it, and the process in place to make it easier for that packing house or that processor to make a run through their plant for the food bank. And through the leadership of the food banks, Florida is a national model for that. And what was less than 1 million pounds that was finding its way into food banks just 4 years ago is now 12 million pounds, and they ran out of money. And they could keep going. And that's because we as American consumers are pretty picky. And if it has a little bit of discoloration on one side, or if it laid in the sun too long, or if it got rain just at the last second and the wrong time of the season, we don't want it. And so we have this abundance brought to us by Florida farmers. Food banks really represents our commitment to exploring new ways to get what Florida farmers grow into the hands of people who desperately need it, because having missed that opportunity for so long was a real moral lapse. And it's just, in a world where so many of the problems that our legislators wrestle with many of them aren't solvable. I mean, there's all the debate in the world may not rebuild the American family before the session ends 60 days later. There's a lot of challenges in children and families, or in the environment, or in a whole host of public policy issues. But the really neat, rewarding part about this problem is that it's imminently solvable. And we've got some great minds working on it, and we benefit from the productivity of the Florida farmer that we have an ability to move that product into the hands of the people who need it the most. A lot of this, as an agriculturalist, as farmers, we always talk that nobody understands what we do and what a concern that is to the future of our industry. And so one of the advantages of this was that we were speaking to our urban legislators about why this now matters to them. I find now that when I go in front of legislative committees, I get more questions from urban legislators about how we can connect in inner city Orlando, inner city Miami, inner city Jacksonville than I am getting from rural legislators, because they now understand how this is all connected to health and wellness. And we know as a society that if we are providing opportunities for people to be food secure, for that mom and dad who are working double shifts, who are worried about their kids being successful in school, if we can connect them with the abundance that we're fortunate to have in Florida, then a lot of those other problems get easier to manage. Whether it's paying their light bill, or going to night school, or having extra time to help their children with their homework, all of those things are connected. And if we live in the state that's home to the most healthy and abundant fresh items during most of the year, shame on us if we don't maximize that opportunity. And so that's what we're doing. And this is a community that has embraced that concept, from the farmers to the academic side of it, to the philanthropic side of it, to the corporate side of it, bringing the partners together in a community that represents both sides of what Florida has to offer. World-class beaches, an international destination for tourism, and some of the most productive farmland in the world, all sharing the same boundaries of this community. And so connecting those dots and making all of this possible, I think, is going to create for Florida a healthier future. And that's really part of our success. So thank you for being a part of that, and I want to again thank your legislative delegation for being willing to go out on a limb for us and make this leadership role possible. And thank all the corporate entities that have been so supportive of making sure food banks like Harry Chapin are successful. And of course, thanking our farmers, without whose abundance none of this other stuff would be possible. And we don't ever want to be as dependent on other countries for our food as we've allowed ourselves to become so dependent on other countries for our energy. And the country that can feed itself is truly free. So thank you all very much for the opportunity to share.